Welcome to the Throttle Up Leadership Podcast. Our theme for 2025 is the future of work. Meaning is the new money. In a world shaped by rapid innovation and constant change, the pursuit of purpose and impact has never been more important. I'm Dr. John Dentico, your host, bringing over 30 years of experience in leadership, strategic thinking, and purpose-driven innovation. Here, we tackle the pressing challenges of our time, from the rise of artificial intelligence to the growing need for meaning in the workplace. Together, we'll uncover how leaders can ethically integrate AI to enhance decision-making and keep humanity at the heart of their organizations. Remember, amidst all the technological advancements, in the end, it's always about the people. This podcast is your resource for actionable tools, thought-provoking discussions, and inspiring stories. It's time to go beyond leadership development and focus on leadership impact, creating workplaces where people thrive, innovation flourishes, and meaning truly becomes the new currency. Thank you for joining me on this journey. Now, let's throttle up and dive into today's episode. Hello again and welcome to the Throttle Up Leadership Podcast. Yes, it's me again, Dr. John Dentico. With me today is Dr. Stephanie Gutnik, president of Tuxedo Concepts, who previously held executive roles at companies such as Yahoo and Outfront Media. She is a global public speaker and consultant focused on the intersection of marketing, technology, and strategy. In particular, Tuxedo Concepts provides management consulting and public speaking to organizations across the world. Her focus areas are integrated marketing communications, business transformation, and women in leadership. Stephanie has spoken globally from Taiwan to Brazil, with notable events including Advertising Week New York and London, Ad Age's Business of Brands in Chicago, Brand Innovators in New York, Possible in Miami, and Ad AI in Toronto. Her articles and interviews can be found in publications such as Ad Week, Ad Exchanger, Digiday, and the Association of National Advertisers. She sits on the board of directors of the Canadian Association of New York and Jewish Community Foundation of Montreal. Stephanie holds a BA from McGill University and has an MBA and doctorate from Edinburgh Business School, and I am truly pleased to have her here with me on the podcast today. Good morning, Stephanie. How are you?
Thank you for a lovely intro. My goodness.
I'll send that to you. You can put it someplace.
Yeah, please.
Anyway, Stephanie, let's begin with a question I'm adding to my repertoire here in the new year, and that is, can you tell me a bit about yourself? Where did you grow up? What, in your mind, were some of the fundamental influences in your life?
Great starting question. I grew up in the prairies of Canada, so Winnipeg, Manitoba, and I'm so grateful, despite not having lived there throughout my entire adult life, to have had that foundation. I was very close with my family. Both sides were very involved in my life, and really salt of the earth people around me in that environment. It was a beautiful upbringing, and the foundation there, having a supportive family to really engage all of my curiosities. I always had my nose in a book when I was a kid, and I went to a wonderful school in elementary where I had a teacher in particular who really pushed me to explore poetry and short stories, and that really kicked off my love for everything creative and defined who I am as an individual. I'm very proud to be a nerd, so to speak.
Great. Glad that worked out for you. And glad you had a wonderful upbringing. There are a lot of people who haven't.
I know.
And who suffered through a lot of different things, but gives them heart. It gives them heart. Let me ask you this, Stephanie. Does Tuxedo Concepts have a mission statement? And if so, can you tell me, my listeners and viewers, what it is and how you arrived at it?
Given your first question, it's like you are a psychic, because Tuxedo is actually the area that I grew up in Winnipeg. So that's where the name comes from. And one of the The principal, I would say, guidelines that my parents had for my sister and I growing up was never to be the best. It was to try our best. And I think the difference there is they weren't looking for us to be fixated on being number one. And it's not to the far other extreme where it's a participation award. It's very, if you do your best, you are going to feel good about whatever the outcome is because you know that you gave it the effort that this task deserved. And so if there's a mission statement for my life and certainly for Tuxedo Concepts and one that I could recommend to others regardless of their age, it's just try. And I don't think that's a bad word. Some people say, don't try, just do. And no, put some effort into it. And regardless of the outcome, either you practice or you try something else.
Yeah, learn best where we make mistakes. And that teaches us so much. And I think try and do really do go hand in hand. You have to try, and maybe you don't make it, but that's okay. Take a step back, try again, and just you'll get there. Perseverance is one of the greatest attributes, I think, that any person can have. And so I agree with you.
Where do you think perseverance comes from?
Say again?
Where do you think perseverance comes from? Is that something that's embedded in us, or can it be learned?
That's a great question. I'll see if I can answer it. I think there has to be some inner drive that doesn't let you give up. And again, I talk about heart. And heart to me is about a person overcoming difficult situation, whether they had an abusive childhood, whether they had parents that were alcoholics. I can tell you, I have been honored on this podcast to have interviewed, at this point, 4 people. I have a woman I'm interviewing next week, 2 of whom were high flyers in their business world, got lured into drugs, went to prison for 2 years, got out and rebuilt their lives, and told me that prison saved their lives. It was that time where they made this change. I had one, Nikki Ballou, what a wonderful guest. Nikki was a refugee from Iran. His parents got him out when the Shah fell and to Canada. He lives in Canada. And Nikki is one of the best, most, I think, highly prized coaches, leadership coaches. Never once did I hear from any one of them, and I don't suspect the woman Naomi, who I'm going to interview next week. You never get the sense that at anywhere in the conversations I had with them, did they ever use or feel like they were victims. They were never victims. They endured setbacks and then somehow pushed through it and are where they are today, including prison for 2 of them. And they are where they are today because there is something there, heart, if you will, that doesn't let you give up. If I could bottle it, I'd be a trillionaire. Believe me. It is that kind of a thing.
I hear you. There's a rabbi that I follow in Montreal quite closely who once put up a message that said, happiness is a feeling, but it's also a choice. And I think that could go hand in hand, that perseverance, what you've just explained. It's a choice that we have to make.
So there are 3 places that you can live in your life. One is you can live in sadness. And there are a lot of people who live in sadness. There's no question about it. They're always sad. You see, when I go to the supermarket, I see the expression on people's faces many times, and they're just sad. I feel bad for them. It just looks like they're sad. There's joy. People can live in joy, extreme happiness and extreme joy. The problem is it's temporal. It's temporary. Eventually, you'll go through a phase probably where you may feel sad, or the term I like is melancholy. You'll have a sense of melancholy. And the third one is being content. being content with things, where all things are in balance, in a sense, where you're overjoyed and you're not sad. You're just content with things as life goes on. So that's where I think where you can live, so to speak.
Yeah.
So let's move on to the next question if we can. Stephanie, how would you characterize your perspective or definition of leadership? And in your mind, if you can, how it relates to hiring and in retaining employees engaged in today's multifaceted workplace?
That is a big ask. And I think just acknowledging that defining a leader in itself is a big ask, because leadership today can mean so much to so many people. What it shouldn't mean is perfection, because even the best leaders are human. And we're just talking about perseverance, and some of the most ambitious leaders are going to be very hard on themselves. That certainly describes me. And I have to accept the fact that I'm going to make mistakes as a leader. And whether it's in my own team or people that I liaise with in the industry that might look up to me and what I'm doing, I always welcome dialogue. I'm very direct with the people that I lead in terms of if they've done something great, they're going to know it right away. Let's celebrate. And if there's room for improvement, that's not a wait until a review type thing. That's a catch it immediately and let's talk about what could be done differently. And then when you see that being put into place, several days later, several weeks later, several months later, call it out and celebrate it with the person, acknowledge that they have made a change. So again, it's a big word, leadership. And if we just unpack it, there are small but very significant things that leaders can do that make an impact, because that's part of what leadership means, right? You're making an impact on other people because you're leading them. So being very clear with your communications, being very mindful of acknowledging what is going to help attain a collective vision, those are all just fundamentals, I believe, to being a leader, all the while acknowledging that, yeah, I try to be a good person every day. And sometimes, for whatever reason, I might miss the mark. And just acknowledging that myself and moving forward. And I would suggest that to anybody else who wants to be in a leadership role.
Yeah. It strikes at the heart of many of the topics that I've had on the podcast before, and that is the notion of authenticity and vulnerability. To be real, again, to be a person, and vulnerability. Don't be afraid to say you made a mistake. Don't be afraid to, hey, I messed that up, man. Boy, I did a terrible job on that. But let's see how we can fix it. Let's see how we can go together and fix it. The leadership model that I have, I talk about this a lot, but so forgive me. The leadership model that I started creating over 30 years ago, this is not a recent development, over 30 years ago, has one basic premise. And the one basic premise to my leadership model is contribution. The idea that we're looking for a contribution. We're looking for people who want to become involved. Now, this is beyond participatory. You hear that all the time. We need participative management or leadership. We want involvement. We want you in here with me, working with me, devising solutions, asking the right questions, the hard questions, devising solutions that helps us take this organization and ourselves down the road. And I think that's so important in terms of having a sensibility where, especially in the world today, and we'll get into this in a minute, in a world today where we're living with the residue of the COVID pandemic. People are no longer searching for just a paycheck. They're looking for some level of values alignment. And the hyper development of AI. And now power. I can remember 30 years ago when browsers were just coming online. And we looked at this and said, wow, the distribution of information, wow, it's going to be incredible. Now today, it seems, everybody is manning up, if you will, with AI tools. I can't scan my email and not see a new AI tool just showed up. Oh, you think ChatGPT is great? Look at this one. Oh, that kind of a thing. So it's amazing where the information, the power really is now distributed to so many. So you need a way to bring them into the process so you can move the organization and the group forward. Any reflection on that?
Oh, I think I love, first of all, the concept of involvement because leading by example is a big one. But for me, it's the choices that I make in which I lead by example, because that's what I believe that I've worked my way toward, is being able to make those decisions for a team. And decisions are so critical to the functioning of a business, especially when we talk about AI. Everything's moving so fast. You have to make decisions and move forward. And that goes hand in hand with, I don't like to be micromanaged. That's just not where I thrive. So when I hire, I look for a team that's also very autonomous. And so there's that balance then of, again, I love your word involvement, because they don't want you to be doing their work. They don't want to see you rolling up your sleeves and getting in their way, but they do need you there to help with that vision and alignment. So I like that premise very much. And then when it comes to AI, look, despite working in tech, I'm a bit of a Luddite myself. I'm very cautious of new technology that comes out because I need to see it bring value. Like, to your point about your inbox being flooded with different offerings, most of those are not going to make my life more efficient or make my company's functions more efficient. So you've got to be able to filter. And if you can't personally, then bring in the right people who can filter the tech that's actually going to be beneficial to your current processes. If you're just bringing in AI to have it, it's a waste of your time and your money. And then when it comes to the use of AI, I use it for so many different things. One of the things I love about it is that if I'm searching through research, it gives me a very quick overview of the topic that I'm looking at, which is wonderful from a time-saving perspective. But you and I both have doctorates. The academic in me then very much has to go back in and make sure that I have the right information, again, to make a decision or to present something to a client. And so that's just a reminder to everybody listening, use it. Absolutely use AI so that you're very comfortable and know, the features that you could benefit from various services, but make sure to always just question what you are receiving from it, because AI isn't perfect at this time. And it's very important still to be using a critical mind when we engage in these types of tools.
Absolutely. My feeling is, even with all the plethora of technology that's facing us every day, in the end, it's always about the people. It's always about the people, and it will always be about the people. You hear a lot of the rhetoric coming from the AI companies saying we're really trying to make life on the planet a lot easier and a lot better. That's really the goal. And I hope they stick to that. I really do. The problem I see right now is that the development of AI is going so fast. It's so furious that even the ethical considerations of explainable AI or transparency are left in the dust a bit, because everybody's trying to get to the marketplace with the next AI tool. It's quite amazing, actually. And I've been very reluctant. I've been very reluctant to use it, but now I'm all in. I have an account, ChatGPT account, pay my $20 a month. And it really helps me flesh out ideas. I've uploaded my book and a bunch of documents, and I can ask it an intelligent question, and it comes back based on my thoughts and profile and things like that. And it'll give me some pretty amazing results, pretty amazing output that I can then use in different areas, in different venues, whether it's putting a presentation together, whether it's creating an online course, using it as an outline. And so I find it to be incredibly helpful. I'm with you 100%.
What's so interesting about what you just said, just to make a comment, is I was
Sure,
thinking about
please.
like the leaps there where, back to the Dewey Decimal System of having to go to a library and you knew the topic that you wanted to research, and then you'd have to go in and find all these different books and then read through the books to find those little nuggets. And then we moved on to, you could just do a Google search or a Yahoo search or whatever it was to be able to find these keywords and topics more easily. And now that's moved to AI. And what I would say again is it's a brilliant time saver. There's no question. So absolutely use it as a tool. But sometimes going through all those books and spending that time unnecessarily trying to find what you're looking for, you might stumble across something that you weren't looking for that is helpful or very interesting. And so that's why, again, I just say for the efficiency that you are receiving, there is still time to go in and take that extra dig and deep dive to maybe find something out that you didn't know that you wanted to. And that's just a little point there too.
Brilliant observation. I was just sitting here thinking of searching through microfiche. Do you remember those days? You're sitting in the library and you're looking at all the microfiche things and you're rolling the thing around. And you would bump into stuff. There's an article. I didn't even know this article was here. Oh, this is great. Oh, I love it. And I would use that or get the citation from that. So, yeah, there are things. Yeah, it's very efficient. It's very direct, but you miss out the other things that get gathered up with it in the net, so to speak.
Yeah,
So,
totally.
very wonderful observation. Let me ask you this, and we may be a bit redundant here, but that's okay. Can you describe for me an overall approach to marketing today? How has it changed, and what fundamental elements are necessary for, let's say, a startup in the tech world, something that they should be really focusing on, like a checklist almost, if you will, from the outset?
Oh, I would say a checklist and a focus has to be who is your consumer, who's your client, who is buying your product or service. And then everything that you do from a marketing perspective should align with that. Because it's very easy. How has it changed? All of the data that's out there and the more immediacy that's enabled through programmatic or automated buying of the different channels. So the quickness of how everything can be done and the data that both fuels the strategy and also measures success is just so much more granular and sophisticated than it used to be. If you get lost in that, if you get lost in the tech and the platforms and the data, you will forget who your target audience is and what best impacts them. And one of the things that I love the most about advertising is the psychology behind all of it. And I am such a sucker for marketing and advertising myself. And I know when it's happening and I get a smile on my face because I think it's brilliant. I'm like, oh, this reached me at the right time, or maybe not the right time, but now suddenly because of the ad, I need it. And that is, if you keep that in mind, who are you reaching? What's the message? What's going to make an impact? That's where the fun lies. And I think that what you then measure will determine whether or not you hit the mark, right?
A colleague of mine, Emily Davis, and I were talking about this. She was on my podcast recently. And we're both devotees of Don Miller's story brand technique. And that simply is, when you go to the marketplace, solve a problem. About a year and a half ago, I completely redid my website. Okay. Before it used to be, here's John Dentico, this is what he does. Nobody cares. No. So now it's, here are the problems. Here are the issues, right? This is how I can perhaps help you solve the problem. I liken it to being like Yoda. Okay? You're not the Jedi Knight here. You're Yoda. As a consultant, as a trainer, I'm more on the Yoda. Probably if I could paint my face green, I'd be too close in terms of the look. But that's beside the point. The point is that you have to be the counselor, if you will, the advisor, and let your client be the Jedi Knight and help them, guide them through the processes of what it's going to take you from point A to point B. Any reflection on that?
You're spot on. And as you were mentioning that, I was thinking about how in product marketing, specifically if the product is tech related, it's very tempting to focus on all of the features of the software platform or hardware device because that's what is distinguishing the product from competition. But that's not really what consumers care about. They're going to want to get into that eventually. Don't drive the message leading on features. You have to talk about what's being solved, the problems that are being solved. And also, where appropriate, have fun with it. There's just, depending on, of course, what is being sold. We saw this year in the Super Bowl ads, for example, that people are really craving some humor. And usually it does help make that more authentic, to use your word earlier, connection with an audience. So lean into that moment and engage in a way that's actually meaningful.
I agree. The simplest example is let's Google it. Well, why are you Googling something? Well, because I have discomfort or pain and I need to find a solution. So, in its simplest form, let's Google it is about going to the pain point and alleviate it, whether it's a piece of information, whether it's you trying to fix your dishwasher, whatever it is. How do you take this thing apart? That kind of thing. It's all about alleviating the pain. I agree with you 100%. I have a question for you. I want to revert back to this. This is going to be an interesting question. You ready?
I'm ready. Yeah.
Okay. I know that one area of focus for you is women in leadership. Okay. Do you think men and women lead differently? And if so, how and why?
I would say that there's probably some characteristics that are more inherent to either men or women, whether or not that's something that they're born with or it's been socialized through school and upbringing is to be determined. And I think is changing certainly with each decade, with each generation, especially now that we make up half of the workforce, right? And I have spent a lot of time thinking about what those traits should be like in my own career. Should I behave more stoic and in certain, I don't want to use the gender stereotypes, but there are certain stereotypes that are still applied to men versus women in the workplace that are important to address. And ultimately, I think that really in this day and age, what we have to be talking more about is simply, again, be yourself. Be your authentic self, however you are, however you identify, whatever those gender stereotypes might be in relation, just be yourself. And it should typically work itself out. But there are areas, salary being one of them, where I have noticed in the past, and I've had this myself, sometimes women have been more reluctant to talk about salary than men. So it's okay. How do we coach everyone on how to approach asking for a promotion and how to talk about compensation? And that being a leader is something I'm very mindful of. Similarly, what we do see from research is that women are more likely to take on voluntary tasks that do not give them credit for a promotion, if that makes any sense in a workplace. That's something, again, to be mindful of. And it's one that we can change in terms of how tasks are given out. Now, to flip that example, I've come a long way in my career by always raising my hand because I wanted to be considered for things that maybe I wouldn't have otherwise. And it helped develop certain skills and meet people and develop a network. So I have to balance the being mindful of what you take on. You don't have to take on everything. You do want to be mindful that what you are doing in your job is contributing to the skills necessary to be eligible for a promotion if that's what you want. But at the same time, raising your hand is a very important part of growing in your career. It was a runaround way to answer more head on the fact that there are still likely some differences. I do believe, even just what I've observed over the past decade, that these are changing. Everybody is going to need coaching on how to become the best employee they can be, the best manager they can be. And there are certain things that we need to be mindful of. One, I'll leave you with this on that question, is we talk a lot about the glass ceiling for women and minorities in the workplace. There's a theory that I've been doing a lot of research on recently called the glass cliff. And that's the tendency for women and minorities to be placed into an executive, like CEO level role in companies that are not doing well performance wise. And you see it more in certain countries than others, and for whatever reason is up for discussion. But what I do know happens in these instances is that the person who takes on this executive role often becomes a scapegoat because they're not being set up for success. Usually, if they come from an external company, they don't have the network and support internally to make the changes that they need to. They're not getting that buy-in. They don't know how the company works. And certainly, it typically will reduce the tenure. So there's far more to discuss about that, but it's something that I am mindful of. And again, there's just some support needed that, yeah, if you bring in someone into a struggling company, give them every opportunity to turn that around. One of the biggest, most important factors there is time, because sometimes you're going to need more than a year or two to really show that your plan is coming to fruition.
I can remember reading an article, this is years ago, the failure of leaders in organizations. And this was across the board. There was no segmentation between. One was the fact that they weren't given the resources that they needed to succeed. There was no support for them. There was no support mechanism put in place so that they could succeed. The organization, as you say, across the board was setting people up in a manner of speaking, number one. Number two is, and again, this is my belief. I've been waiting 30 years for this moment in time. And because, as I mentioned to you, my model of leadership is based on contribution. So who's making contribution? Question. Who's the smartest person in the room? Is it the CEO? Maybe not. Is it the CFO? Maybe not. How about the person who has a ChatGPT account and spends 3 or 4 hours in the evening working ChatGPT and other sources to come up with ideas for the organization's future? That person may be closer to the smartest person in the room. So what I see happening is this right now, and why I say I've waited 30 years for this, is that the old ideas of leadership, the old models of leadership are being shredded. There's a shredding. Because what's going to matter, in my opinion, is the ability to take knowledge, take information, and convert it into a product or a service more, not only more rapidly, but more in a way that makes it the best service. Because you, as you well know, you can provide services and products, but they may not be the best. You're just throwing stuff. It's the world's biggest spaghetti throwing contest. Or just keep throwing it against the wall, hoping something will stick. No. And I think, I use this example because I can't think of a better one, and that is, whether you like this guy or not, is Elon Musk and SpaceX. How can a company that started several years ago be leading the space race, right? Well, there's a couple of answers. Not only is the guy in charge pretty smart, but they're really good at rapid prototyping. They're really good at saying, okay, let's launch it. Oh, it blew up. Okay, that's not going to work. Let's go back to the drawing board and let's try something different. To the point where they've almost lost the companies. And the same thing with Tesla. And now they're leaders in the industry because they weren't afraid to do rapid prototyping, bring in the contribution from different people, galvanize it together, and move that whole thing forward. So I think that rapid prototyping, information involvement from as people who want to be involved, who are united by a galvanizing message from in terms of the mission statement, is really defining the future paths. I'd love to get your reaction to that.
I adore Elon. So thank you for bringing that up. And you're right. When it comes to companies that are able to just eclipse anybody in their path, right? There is this idea of creative destruction. And that is where a new idea brings about the demise of what existed beforehand. And that is so applicable in today's age because we're always looking to do something better. And what's interesting to me, going back to someone like Elon, and when we talk about leadership, it's so funny because you see so much discourse. People love him, don't like him. Everybody has something to say. What I look at is for anybody who says he has an ego or who is irked by where he is, I look at it as just a combination of confidence and curiosity, and one that ties back to what I started with about doing our best. Because what his team has displayed is that they're confident in their work. And when something goes wrong, it's not an ego hit. It's, okay, we're confident enough that we're going to take this back. And we're curious enough that we're going to figure out how to do it better. And so if there was an ego at play, they wouldn't keep trying. And so that's something that I find just very interesting about the whole situation. And also this concept of hiring smarter than you. There are certain managers and leaders out there that could be intimidated by bringing on someone that sees the world in a different way and that questions how things work. And for me, it makes my job much easier and much more entertaining if I bring on people that just know way more or think in a different way than I do. And I think that from what I've seen of how Elon hires, it appears that he follows this as well.
And the head of SpaceX is a woman.
Amen. Yeah.
I want to go back to one point I made before, and something I've been talking to many podcast guests and leaders is, and I use this because it's a lot easier to understand. For the past 70 or 80 years, we have raised a generation, the CEOs of organizations, senior leaders, of Jedi Knights. That's what we've done. Because we hoped that when things got tough, they'd come down, brandish their light sword, and vanquish the issues and the problems that lay before us. Done. In today's world, the CEO of an organization, from where I sit, has got to be a lot more like Yoda. Yoda, who was raising a generation of Jedi's, who will actually do the job, vanquish the problems and issues that lie before you. And what Yoda did was he was the great facilitator. He was the great teacher. He, in a sense, opened the door for Luke to learn and allowed Luke to make a lot of mistakes. Allowed Luke to go into the cave. You only take what you got, buddy. That's the way it is. But bring what you got. And I think that's so important for people to understand that in this world perspective that we live in today, you've got to create an environment where people come to do their best work every single day, where meaning is the new money. Meaning is the new currency. The greatest single motivation force on the planet, from John Dentico's perspective, is meaning. You allow people to gather meaning. I matter. My work matters. And I will tell you, from my own experience, if you can do that, you can eliminate a great deal of burnout. Because I'll tell you, from my own experience, I can remember times being just so fried, just burned out.
Oh, yeah.
And there were times you couldn't burn me out. You could try, but you couldn't burn me out because I had the fire in my belly. I knew I mattered. It was mine. I was working on a problem. And people recognized that and understood that I was there. I was doing whatever I could to make it work. And I think, to me, that is where it's at today. And the more people we can bring in, make no judgments about people, push all that stuff out of the way, get away from it, and say, here's what the problem is. What can we do together to focus on the issues and move forward? Let me have your reaction to that, please.
I love how adaptable you are in terms of you've seen a certain workplace that you experienced And now we are welcoming in a new generation. Everybody likes to talk about Gen Z and how they're not loyal and the quiet quitting and all of these things. Ultimately, you hit the nail on the head. People are looking for meaning. And there's a give and take in that scenario. I do believe I started off, do you need me to send a fax? What do you need me to do? And I was the first to arrive at the office and I was the last to leave. I don't know if that exactly is still applicable in today's environment, especially with hybrid and people working remotely across time zones. And typically the work schedule in a day has become a bit more flexible if you need to fit some things in, so long as you're getting the job done. But I'm going to emphasize that point is getting it done and doing it in a way that is best for the organization and your team. And that's where this new generation and everybody else has to be very observant about, okay, how am I going to fit in here? And how am I going to make an impact? And when that impact is well received, that's where you have the value exchange where bosses that potentially might be of a different generation are getting what they need to move the business along. And people who are looking for potentially more and are looking to work in a different way, they're also gaining that, what you just said, acknowledgement and the desire to go above and beyond for their company. So I think that it used to be the value prop was you do your work, you get paid. And now it's changing to we're going to do a good job together. And I also about leaders, when you mention Yoda and so on, I think that part of leadership that people are looking for is just someone and I'm going to say at the top, no matter how flat your organization, you need someone to look up to say, everything's going to be okay. And that comes with experience and it comes with wisdom and it comes with patience and a lot of things that have to be learned along the way. But when you have someone that you can look to that you know is going to, even if they're not happy with a decision that was made or an outcome, we're going to fix this. It's going to be okay. That's the kind of leader certainly that I enjoy working for. That's how I was raised. And I do believe that more of that out there, it would be very beneficial.
Great. Yeah. If we can turn that power on and leave it on, it's limitless. It's limitless what people in any organization can do. Stephanie, we're getting close to the end. I'll ask you my world famous question that I've asked from people all over the world. And that is, if you had a magic wand and you could wave it at any issue or problem in the world in which you work and see every day, what is that problem and how did you arrive at that?
Well, a lot of my work is geared to advertising and technology and marketing. And as I was saying a little bit before, you can get really into the weeds in areas that, don't make an impact as much, very much into the data or the software. And what I would love to see more of, especially from the incoming marketing-centric folks, whether they're on the brand side or at an agency, is the ability to just try new things. Because usually there's going to be a recipe, if you will, that they're going to inherit about the marketing strategy, the media strategy. This is what works, and we're going to continue to do that. I love the idea of pushing everybody, but particularly those that are just starting, just get messy and make some mistakes. And you know what? They might find something that they've tried that really does work in a way that wasn't anticipated. So whether it's a slush fund that is more common, implement it if you're on the brand side, agency side, have that there for people who are curious to just go experiment. Because in whatever you do, again, looking back to the scientific method, it's all about having a hypothesis and going about it in a way that calculated risk, right? So if I had a magic wand, there would be a make mistakes through the scientific method slush fund for young marketers, particularly out there.
And marketing's created this whole concept of test marketing.
Right.
It's not, should we change the entire marketing for a particular product or service? Not now. Why don't we prototype? Why don't we test it? Why don't we get an audience in here, 50, 100 people? Let's run it past 2 or 3 groups. You guys created that stuff. And I think that, again, I agree with you. I think the more rapid prototyping we do in a marketing sense, the more we try things, be creative, be off the wall, let it rip,
Yeah.
Just, yeah, what are you going to lose? A few bucks? Okay, fine. But you may hit gold here. You may hit gold. The one commercial, even today, that stands out in my mind is the introduction of the Macintosh.
Oh,
And the woman running down, the hammer throwing woman who runs down the middle of the aisle, what everybody just kind of like this, and throws the hammer through the Big Brother screen. It just set the world on fire. It was just, I forget how many thousands, tens of thousands of phone calls Apple got after that. But it was so different, so incredibly cutting edge that was 1984. I remember the year, 1984. It's with me today. It's just amazing.
and that's the
Go
power of
ahead.
advertising done right. Like one of my favorite TV commercials is the Molson I Am Canadian commercial because I am. And it's so iconic and it really registers with, again, its target audience. It strikes a nerve. It's very personal. So that's the kind of, it's art and it is an example of the zeitgeist of a time and it can last many years of impact. So yeah, I think that's the magic to it. And it's those types of situations where you're doing something new and you're questioning things that I think really brings people together because
Yeah.
they are satisfying curiosity, they're having fun, they're relying on each other, and they have the confidence of leadership to go at it. And so I think that's it's like a perfect mix.
I'll tell you what else comes to mind is talk about authenticity. Paul Hogan's shrimp on a Barbie commercial for Australia. You say, brilliant. It's just, this is who we are. It's Australians. This is what we do. And absolutely, I think of that. It just brings joy to my heart. I got to tell you.
Oh,
So, Stephanie, thank you so very much for your time today. I truly appreciate your time here on the Throttle Up Leadership Podcast. I've had a blast. It's been wonderful. I wish you all the success in the future. Great things to come to you every single day. Thank you so much for your time. I appreciate it.
it's very mutual. Thank you.